If God loves humans, why does he let suffering, unhappiness, and death exist? Bai Shi lived a worldly and unspiritual life, but as he lay on his hospital bed, preparing to leave, he raised questions about the purpose of existence in a spirit, a Catholic side. His spleen leaks sometimes with small explosions. His time is running out. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, and the last months had been a painful battle. He was surrounded by his sons, daughters, wives, and several other people. They are called the Samsung people. An almost superheroic name, Samsung people, speaks to the give up of public employees who dedicate their lives to build a regime. In return, they benefit great benefits, salary, and social recognition. It is believed that Samsung people are treated well than any other employee in Korea. So they are also the best in Korea. And today, on November 18, 1987, his leader, Samsung, is in the final moments of its life. Doctors predicted that he would not survive today. As Basili looked into the abyss, he may have wondered about the life he had lived. Making Kong Lo started from a dried fish and vegetable store in Daegu City and has grown into a large corporation through influence in food, chemicals, technology, and communications. With all the glory of the Samsung Group, he wondered how many people know the secret behind it. The deal he made with the president at that time was, force your company to be associated with politics. This causes them to often have to drink their backs before the political process, sending money and resources to the state, and in return, they are outlawed. The conclusion of this agreement is necessary and must continue after his death. As long as they maintain extensive relationships with people in the state, nothing will be able to stop Samsung's development. It's time, the doctor whispered to the family. Bichi's mind began to become confused. He felt increasingly tired and exhausted. Everything I've done, it's all for the sake of it. Customer development, and to maintain Samsung. That would absolve me of all my sins, right? He might have wondered as his heart began to pound. At 5:05 p.m., Bichi Lee, the richest man in Korea and founder of Samsung Group, can finally rest in peace. But the Samsung people around him couldn't rest. They didn't have much time and immediately departed, taking Lee Kun-hee, Bichi's third son, come along. The Samsung people helped Bichi open a complicated stock transfer deal, valuation and restructuring of the group's various subsidiaries, to ensure that Kun-hee owned a sufficient number of shares. And now, all that remains is to vote. 25 minutes later, the presidents of 37 Samsung subsidiaries at the headquarters of Samsung Group. I'll be brief, who supported Kun-hee for leadership, a Samsung person said. As if in a competition, everyone quickly raised their hands. So it's decided. Kun-hee realized the eyes of all 37 leaders were on him. Chairman Lee, what do you want us to do? The passing of B.C. Lee, the great first president, truly a squirrel saver. He built the largest chaebol group in Korea. makes an important contribution to the economic development of this country. Samsung's ambiguous relationship politicians have tainted the company's official website and set a precedent for his descendants to continue to do the same. But for his third son, Kun-hee, learning how to get involved in politics is not what Kun-hee is most worried about. Because at 45 years old, he became the new president of Samsung Electronics. A major event shocked their family. According to tradition, BC's second son will be the successor. However, due to a foolish attempt at embezzling money, you put the family in danger with President back. A ruthless leader demands compensation from Samsung. In BC's eyes, his second son is no longer suitable to lead. And so is the eldest son. The person had unstable actions during the short time he held the position of president. By exclusion, BC announced that Kun-hee, the third son, will be the successor. This caused a conflict within the family, causing Samsung Group to be divided into 5 separate units. The precious gem among them is Samsung Electronics, which will retain Cho Kun-hee. The question is, can he stand up and prove worthy of the loyalty of Samsung people? To improve his abilities and chances of success, his father BC instructed Kun-hee to join Samsung in 1966, when he was 24 years old, to begin his training. At first, it seemed like he couldn't make any impression. For Samsung people, exactly during the first 10 years, there aren't any significant closures directly related to Kun-hee. Maybe his gentle, quiet, and scary nature got in the way. Or you simply don't fully understand this great empire. However, when Samsung began to move deeper into the electronics field, an opportunity appeared, allowing BC to make a name for himself. In 1982, 5 years before BC, both BC and Kun-hee are on a flight back to Korea. During the years from 1969 to the early 1970s, Samsung has formed partnerships with Sanyo NEC Corporation and Sumitomo Corporation to train about 137 Samsung employees. When they return, they will branch out across departments and continue to work closely with Sanyo to launch the first black and white TV in 1970. Later that year, the division recorded revenue of $250,000 and by 1978 had sold about 2 million black and white TVs. Samsung also expanded into 2 new areas, chemical manufacturing and shipbuilding. With all the advancements and developments up to now, you'd think Samsung's owners would throw a party on the plane. But instead, BC seems to be falling into decline, while his son, Kun-hee, is preparing to help his father get out of that situation. In the past few days, they have been traveling to Boston, received an honorary doctorate from Boston University. However, they realized that the center of semiconductor technology lies in America. So they took a short trip to look at IBM, GE, and HP factories. Their technology is amazing, much more advanced than what they have in Korea. To the point that Samsung actually doesn't produce one type of component. Although both are semiconductor devices, Samsung's product is one generation behind and is only suitable for basic computers, in an era when the first personal computers were introduced. "We're too late, my child," BC said, with a pessimistic expression, as he left the factory. Back home. For BC, the progress of the Americans was doubtful. Whether Samsung will ever catch up in the semiconductor field remains to be seen. But Kun-hee thinks differently. And now, at an altitude of more than 9,000 meters, 0.000 feet, Kun-hee must convince his father to continue the semiconductor business. There are a few ways you can do this. The first way will rely on time and effort. Time, effort, and a little luck. By chance, a businessman from California called Samsung CEO J.K. to share about his troubled semiconductor venture. Realizing the opportunity, Samsung's chairman approved the acquisition of shares in this project. Kun Hee, who oversaw the project and recognized the growing dependence on semiconductors, commented that this could be huge. Therefore, he partially funded the transaction to buy back the entire company. You might argue that Kun Hee got too personal in this project. But for him, that doesn't change the story. Samsung has invested a lot of time and effort. They certainly don't want things to become self-serving. The second story that Kun Hee can rely on is the origin of national security. When President Bok pushed Korea to receive and produce technology, they have to rely on loans from the US to finance their operations. These loans are at risk of not being repaid if the semiconductor industry fails. But beyond money, it's also important for Samsung to maintain its relationship with the government, to continue the privileges they have always had. This origin is quite unstable and uncertain because the Bok government changed after the assassination in 1979. So Kun Hee decided to follow the third story. Dad, I want to talk to you about the semiconductor business. Son, this trip has made me more alert. Dad, do you think we're late? Because of that, I don't think it matters. The important thing is, if continuing with semiconductors is going to help us. I don't understand what you mean. Look at Hyundai. They just started producing semiconductors. Do we want to lose to them? Kun Hee could see the competitive fire in his father's eyes burning. Of course not. In the end, Samsung decided to continue with semiconductors as a reaction against Hyundai, a move that reflects BC's extremely competitive nature. But in terms of timing, some people would argue that it was the first sign. Shows that he is sure to challenge Samsung leader Cho Kun-hee. Not long after, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and was gone before the first advanced semiconductors were produced. Full of respect, gratitude, and a feeling of insecurity, the Samsung people and BC's son placed the first semiconductor chip on BC's grave. Thank you, Dad. Dad was right. Growing this business has been very difficult, but I promise to do everything I can to develop it. I hope you continue to support me. In the following years, Kun Hee invested heavily in research, development, and innovation. In the 2000s, Samsung's semiconductor division achieved a major turning point. Semiconductor production outperforms Japanese and American rivals. Eventually, this department became the sales department, bringing the most profit to Samsung Electronics, contributing up to 50% of the company's operating profits. Kun Hee's decision to continue staying with the field semiconductor sector and then invest in this lucky successor seem witness. Proving your talent is more than just luck. Over time, this along with a number of other problems began to form his mind that quality was more important than quantity. And for a long time, it will remain a guiding thought for you, until a series of events happen. The first event is the strong rise of Japanese companies. Most notably, Sony bought Columbia Pictures in 1989 for $3.4 billion. But more important was the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1991. Undefined. For Kun Hee, this ends the Cold War, but opens up a new type of economic war: globalization. Without a strong protectionist leader like President Bak, person who was murdered, can Korean companies survive attacks from the West and Japan? These questions and events made Kun Hee ponder and worry day and night. And in the summer of 1992, people said he had lost up to 10 kilograms, equivalent to 20 pounds of weight. You might think he's weird, even paranoid. But when he grew up, he was the son of the richest man in Korea. And see our brothers and sisters betray each other. Kun Hee's paranoia is probably what has protected him so far. His fear continued to increase, and in 1993, It eventually transformed into Samsung's history with the Frankfurt Declaration. It was June 7, 1993, 5 years after the death of Samsung's founder. Samsung has begun transferring from other business units into Samsung Electronics, mainly to develop their own IP technology division. They have also expanded into Asia, Europe, and America. That's how Samsung products appear in the hands of technology lovers, people who laugh at Samsung or even mock Samsung. Kan Hee gathered 200 Samsung executives from Seoul to Frankfurt for a toxic management meeting. Few people know what this meeting is about. Some people had smiling faces because they had never been to Germany before. One by one, everyone gathered at the Sassy Hotel, Kempinski Hotel, Frankfurt. Ravenbridge. You can enjoy light snacks while waiting for the start. Near the front of the stage is Tomio Fukuda. He was different from everyone else because he had no interest in eating or drinking anything. He was hired as a design consultant by Cho Kan Hee, and he suspected that his report had triggered this meeting. For the past 3 years, I have been gathering information secretly, set up surveillance for Cho Kan Hee to understand why Samsung products were detained. On the surface, management painted a rosy picture. But is that true? 3 days ago, Fukuda completed his report and presented it to Cho Kan Hee. Chairman Lee, what I am about to show you are merely the facts. Fukuda stammered. On the TV-shaped table, there is a small group closing the washing machine door. Most seem unable to close the door properly. They then took out a utility knife and started scraping excess plastic on the door before closing the door until they were able to close the washing machine door. Fukuda-san, what am I looking at? Kan Hee's face turned red. Our washing machine door cannot be closed. Chairman Lee, you are right. Undefined. Our stuttering mold is not that accurate. No washing machine can be closed. So they scraped off the excess plastic themselves. No one fixes the stuttering mold? Chairman Lee sat down. Ears may vibrate. Are there any other problems? It's in the majority of our products. Fukuda sensed something inside. Chairman Lee was hurt. As he continued into a room, standing quietly outside, Fukuda could hear screaming through him and ban. Washing machine production management and lasted an hour. I thought we discussed maintaining quality above all else. From now on, I will be responsible for them. Back to Kempinski, Fukuda recognized the washing machine management team. Like him, they also sat there tired. They both knew it was going to be a stressful lecture. Please calmly listen to me. President Lee stepped onto the stage. We are facing a new crisis. A harsher economic war has begun. And we are on the brink of facing a life or death situation. Everyone was shocked, except Fukuda. He went on to explain that harsh reality. Korean companies are no longer up to their standards when rivals Japan and the US may join. He then announced that from today, they would switch words, quantity production to quality production. It was lunchtime and the hotel staff brought in sandwiches for the executives. As Chairman Lee continued to speak, change everything except your wife and children. Because starting today, we will be in a continuous crisis with no end in sight. He continued like this for the next 2 days, sometimes even cursing at people at least 8 hours a day. It is certain that he conveyed the message. Chairman Lee then held a lunch with his team. What do people think of the message so far? Chairman Lee asked. The slightly nervous directors were scratching their heads, signals that everything is going well, except for one person who said, Chairman Lee, thank you for what you have shared. I think I've realized that quality is also important. He said, also. Chairman Lee read the intention behind it. I want to say, quality and quantity are just two sides of the same coin. Before the man finished, a spoon was thrown away, and Chairman Lee stood up. I understand. Undefined. During the next 3 months, he decided that, because not all directors agree with me, he would spread the message himself and travel around the world to give speeches. To ensure your message is not misleading, he talked to each team and spent a total of 350 hours training, eventually creating a set of documents called the New Management Initiative. His push from quantity to quality was pivotal for Samsung. Seeks to become a world superpower in technology. Because it was quite late to have a unified voice, because Samsung had already begun to expand through joint ventures, partnerships, and distributors. This will spill over into marketing activities. And at the beginning of this century, Samsung has 55 advertising companies under contract. Each company sends a separate message about Samsung. Unity beyond corporate culture is needed. Needed to beat their competitors, especially Sony and a growing Apple, which released IBIT in 2001. It's time for the Samsung man to leave the streets and step onto the global stage and wage a cosmic war to become the world's largest TV and smartphone manufacturer. For the first time, singer Lil YB became a central person in the pre-regiment. Lil Y used Samsung after the legacy of his father, Y Byung-chul. Undefined.